We're super excited to be here today to talk about the Ted Lasso way. As we get going, I encourage you all to share where you are listening in from today in our Zoom chat. It's always fun to see. I would also like to welcome Ingrid, our moderator today, who will be monitoring the Q&A in the Zoom. So let's kick off. This is our agenda for today's presentation. We will start by level setting what you can expect from today's session, give you all an insight to who this Ted Lasso person is, discuss the vast and often scary leadership support that exists today, which will follow with us sharing what we refer to as the Ted Lasso way. And finally, recapping on the top takeaways we have to share with you all on the Lasso way of leadership. As we progress through this talk and you have a question, we encourage you put it in the Zoom Q&A and we will happily answer at the end. Okay, before we get into this, let's start with a couple of rounds of introductions. I'll start. My name is Dee O'Callaghan and I'm an engineering manager here at VMware Tanzu Labs.
And my name is Lindsay Gillespie. I'm a senior software engineer here also at Tanzu Labs.
Hi everybody, I'm Annie Laughlin. I'm a staff PM also at Tanzu Labs. Pumped to be here today.
Fantastic. So now you've met Lindsay, Annie, and myself. Let's get going and let's talk first about what you can expect and not expect from today's presentation. The goal of our talk today is to share the simple core principles to effective leadership that we call the Ted Lasso way. For those that don't know anything about Ted Lasso, or for those that do, you will learn how he embodies the traits of an inspiring leader, someone that people admire, follow, care for, and listen to. However, what you shouldn't expect from today's presentation is to walk away feeling you know the ins and outs of football. We are not here to discuss the sport. And we're also not here to act as TV critics on the show. Lastly, what I don't call out here, if you've never seen the show, there might be some small spoilers, but not too many. And there's no copyright infringement intended with our presentation. And we definitely don't profit from giving you this talk. So with that, let's get going and let's discuss who is this Ted Lasso? Well, I'm here to tell you Ted Lasso is an Emmy award-winning, laugh out loud, heartwarming comedy on Apple TV. However, no one should be fooled into thinking that this is all the show is. Even if you're not familiar with the comedy, it's okay, because you will still gain valuable information from us today. Ted Lasso that is the main character in the show played by Jason Sudeikis. He's an American college-level football coach from the Midwest who was hired to manage an English Premier League football team called AFC Richmond. And by football, we mean soccer. Cue first spoiler alert. Soccer is a sport that Ted is totally clueless about. Can you even begin to imagine moving across continents to coach a sport you didn't even know could end in a draw match? Well, Ted is that person. And some of us here today might have been lucky enough in life to meet someone that had a profound impact on us. The kind of person that encourages us to become a better version of ourselves. Ted is also that person. And despite being a quirky misfit with endless dad jokes and little to no knowledge on the sport of football, he does make up for it with his deep and profound understanding of human nature. So you may still be asking, why are we talking to you today about a lighthearted, warm, fuzzy comedy that has taken the world by storm? The answer is simple. Ted Lasso didn't just bring happiness into the homes across the globe. This show is packed with numerous aha moments that truly simplifies what it is and what it means to be an effective leader, regardless of your profession. Ted nails being a leader, and we are here to share our favorite lessons with you to take away and begin to put these into practice. But first, a little snippet.
This is a bit of news from the other side of the Atlantic. AFC Richmond announced the hiring of their new manager, American football coach Ted Lasso.
You're an American who's now in charge of a football club despite possessing very little knowledge of the game.
I know that AFC Richmond is going to give you everything they got, win or lose.
Or tie.
Right, y'all do ties here. Did you see that? He must be from England, yeah? Wales. Is that another country?
Yes and no.
How many countries are in this country?
4.
Like it or not, Richmond are changing the way we do things. And from now on, that way is the Lasso way.
Hey, look, this car's got an invisible steering wheel.
I always smile when I watch that clip, no matter how many times. So anyway, before we get into our 3 core principles about the Ted Lasso leadership way that we've come up with, let's briefly touch on the leadership landscape out there. What does it look like, and how is this relevant to our Ted Lasso leadership way? So I'm sure you all have probably taken some type of leadership course or read a leadership article, so you know that there are so many widely available free resources on best practices, how to lead, different viewpoints, how to become a successful leader, and really you can find tailored content depending on where you are in your leadership experience or what path you've taken. However, with all those wonderful things, I think there's also some cons when we are looking at this landscape, that you can actually have this choice paralysis where you're just inundated with so many options that you kind of shut down and do nothing, and you're just stuck. Second, it can be difficult to distill all of these different viewpoints into something that really speaks to you. And then finally, some of these become very overly complex, formal, lots of matrices. So as we were thinking about this, if we go to the next slide, we try to just boil this down in Ted Lasso leadership examples for his way and our way of leading with these 3 core principles. And those 3 are being authentic and remaining transparent and true to your beliefs, empowering, so empowering other leaders, even if you are the formalized leader on your team. And then finally, leading with courage. So you will have to make difficult decisions, and they sometimes are unpopular, but still having the courage to make those difficult decisions. So if we dive into the first core principle around authenticity, one of the really awesome things that Ted does in this show, he remains consistent and authentic. And this is like really one of his core tenets in his leadership philosophy. So we're going to talk about one specific example of his authenticity where there's this really cool, subplot around this sign that he puts up around believe. And he has this wonderful quote that kind of sums it up, that I believe in hope, I believe in believe. So when he first comes, as Dee mentioned, he knows nothing about soccer or football, not American football. And there's a lot of skepticism. The team has very low morale. There's no team culture. And if there is some type of culture, it's very unsupportive and broken. So overall, the team and the org is just deflated. Everyone's irritable. No one wants to be there. So Ted, with his authenticity, comes in and decides to just write out on a huge poster board, believe, all caps, and just posts it up in the locker room. Doesn't say anything. People kind of roll their eyes and think, who's this dummy who knows nothing about soccer putting up these signs? But he remains true to this, and he really does believe and believe. And so over time, this authenticity and this belief in himself, in his team, in their abilities becomes, it has a ripple effect, and it kind of starts to permeate throughout the team. And you start to see teammates, supporting each other, coming together to build a positive culture. So why did this specific example speak to us as leaders? I think we really found a calling with remaining authentic to Ted. And this authenticity has this ripple effect, raising the hopes and support, not only of yourself as a leader, but also of your team. And then he was able to foster this culture where the whole team rallies around believing and believe. So next, I wanted to share one of my own stories about leadership and authenticity that highlights some of these kind of core points. So many years ago, I was leading an engineering team with very different cultural and professional norms and backgrounds than myself. I was the only woman on about a 30-person engineering team. I was, coming from halfway around the world over to Sri Lanka from San Francisco. And I think there was a lot of skepticism around, I was new, I was, very different, and how the heck was I going to make an impact with this team and this product? So it was definitely difficult, but I really pushed myself to remain authentic. And how did I do that? I was okay with speaking up and saying, hey, I don't, understand that concept, or tell me a little bit more, or say, I don't have the answer right now, but let's go find out. I think secondly, showing humility and curiosity to build rapport with my team. And then highlighting that all these learnings and flaws that I have should hopefully encourage self-awareness of everyone else on my team. So in the end, we ended up being able to gain alignment, not only internally, but with lots of other teams and with the senior engineering leads. And we actually were able to build this culture of self-awareness, humility, and this, modeling of our teammates, not only as leaders within the team, but also how they show their own core values and show up to work each day. So with that, I will pass it over to Lindsay, who's going to talk about the second core principle.
All right, thank you, Annie. Okay, so now let's get into how we can empower our teams to have many leaders. Thank you, Dee. All right, so here we have Ted on the far left, Ted Lasso, and on the far right, we have Nate. So there's lots of ways to help foster this many leaders concept on your team, but we're going to start with one example from Ted Lasso. So here we have Ted, who recognized that his equipment manager, again, Nate on the far right, had a wealth of knowledge about the team and the sport. And to everyone's surprise, Ted made the choice to lean into Nate's knowledge by promoting him to assistant coach. Ted truly believed in Nate's ability and recognized how he could help the team improve in ways that Ted could never accomplish. So not only was Ted doing this to utilize Nate's football knowledge better, but he was also showing the team that good ideas can come from anywhere. This is one way to help encourage a supportive environment so that everyone feels comfortable speaking up and sharing their ideas, whether they're a formal leader or not. Next slide, please. All right, so now how do we tie this back into the tech field? I'll start with an example from my experience as a software engineering consultant. So every day I get to pair with developers to help them become technical leaders. And to do this, we have a phrase called I do, we do, you do, explaining the progression of learning new skills. So at the beginning of a client engagement, I might be more vocal in meetings and heavy-handed in pairing on the code. But as my pair gets more comfortable in meetings and with the new skills, I'll recommend that they speak up in those meetings or lead on different tasks. Then by the end of the engagement, they're able to do this on their own and keep spreading that knowledge and confidence to empower other leaders. And again, we are somewhat informal leaders as software engineers on the team, but still trying to encourage that environment to be able to speak up and value everyone's opinion. So here we have 3 bullet points about the Ted Lasso way for you to be able to take home with your team. So this first one, showing that you care with your team. This is, a core thing, being human about it. Oftentimes this means just being there for your team and building that trust. I try to do this every day with my pair through active listening, supporting work-life balance, and having honest and respectful conversations. Second, staying humble. Don't let the fact that you're a leader, even if it's informal or formal, overshadow the skills and accomplishments of your team. For me, this might look like staying silent for a little longer after a stakeholder asks our team a technical question, even if I have an awesome answer, to allow my pair the opportunity to answer if they're interested. And third here, any way that you can give kudos to your team is much appreciated because a leader can't do anything without their team. It can be as small as saying thank you more often, just as Ted does in the show, or as large as promoting Nate to assistant coach. Anywhere in between, the team will greatly appreciate. And those are just a few ways to empower many leaders on your own team. And I'm going to pass it over to Dee for our final core principle.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Annie. So yes, the final core principle is encourage. Now, I know I mentioned we're not here to teach you on the sport of soccer or football, but a very quick and high-level insight so I can set the scene for my example I'm about to share with you on the core principle of courage. Soccer is a team sport where teams play 2 halves of 45 minutes. A team is made up of 11 players who work together to try and score goals or defend their goal. And despite it taking just one person to kick the ball in the back of the net, it takes an entire team to win a game. Now, how did Ted show courage as a football coach? Well, there are many examples throughout the show of how Ted showed courage, but one in particular that stood out to us was in relation to this player that you're looking at right now called Jamie Tartt, AFC Richmond's star player. Now, Ted made a very unpopular decision during a key game, and this was to bench, or I should say replace, Jamie due to his self-centered, arrogant, and selfish behavior. Jamie was not a team player. He refused to pass the ball to his teammates on the field, and despite scoring a goal that was in such a pivotal match, the tipping point came when Jamie showed no empathy for his teammate Sam, who fell to the ground injured during the game. This kind of behavior was not tolerated by Ted, who immediately called Jamie to the bench, substituting him for another player. The crowd went crazy. The team were stunned, and no one could believe that Ted would bench his star player during such a critical match. But the results of Ted's courage speak for themselves. The players rallied, they passed the ball and communicated clearly, resulting in the first win for AFC Richmond all season. So, how does Ted's example of courage I just shared apply to any leadership role? Well, firstly, we must understand as a leader, there are times you will need to make very unpopular decisions or have difficult talks with individuals. For example, let me share a recent and difficult discussion I had to have for a year-end review with one of my underperforming reports. This individual is friendly, empathetic, and has many great qualities. However, they did struggle over the last year within their role by not paying attention in meetings, not responding to tasks, going rogue on the backlog, and picking stories without any context, all of which led to increased conflict within the team, coding errors, and ultimately missing deadlines, which caused the client to be extremely frustrated. Despite continuous feedback through a regular cadence of one-on-ones, guidance, support from me and their team, the individual still failed to move the needle on progress, resulting in this difficult year-end review, which also impacted pay equity and promotion cycle. Now, as a manager, how did I show courage during this year-end review? What were the lessons from Ted that I applied in this example I just shared? Well, one, I ensured to stay curious throughout the year on how he was performing, seeking regular feedback on from the client, from any teams that collaborated with this team and with this individual, and peers outside of their discipline. It's extremely important as a leader to stay fully informed so that you do draw the correct conclusion to any scenario. Next, once you've done your homework, asking many questions and ensuring you've landed on a fully informed decision, it's imperative you trust and believe in yourself. Having the self-confidence that the conclusion you've come to is based on facts. This year-end review was not a personal one-sided opinion. I had gone to great lengths to understand in detail how the individual was showing up daily. And finally, I communicated the discussion I had with this individual in an unwavering fashion, sharing my findings on their performance throughout the year. I talked to their poor performance with an empathetic yet steadfast manner, allowing time for questions and offering the individual further support. These are the steps I followed to show courage as a leader, and ones you can lean into when you need to call on the principle of courage. So, this brings us full circle on the Ted Lasso approach to leadership. And to recap on the profound Lasso tidbits shared here today with you all, it's important you remain authentic in your approach to dealing with your team. Work with them through difficult times and stay self-aware at all times. It's important you empower your team in a caring manner, stay humble, and give individuals the credit they deserve, loudly and proudly. And finally, show courage in decisions you make. As Ted would say, believe in yourself. It's not always easy being a leader. There are times we must make unpopular decisions, but remembering these principles of authenticity, empowerment, along with courage, you can trust any decision you make is a decision that's for the good of the individual, the team, or the company. We hope that this talk has given you some aha moments, just like Ted gave us. Now, that concludes our slides for today, and let's lean to Ingrid to understand if we have any questions in the Q&A that we can help address.
Hi, everyone. I don't see any questions in the Q&A just yet. Quick reminder to everyone who is on the attendees, please drop any questions that you may have in the Q&A section, and we will make sure to answer them.
We answered them all. I'm curious at how many folks have actually seen this show, but we were wondering how much background we should give on the show when we were trying to talk about leadership skills we learned.
I am actually starting to see some questions roll in. Would you like for me to read them out for you? Okay, so we have a first question. It says, how do you let go of ego when direct reports interrupt you to chime in with answers first? As a female leader of an all-male team and only woman in engineering leadership, these interruptions can trigger past experience and make it difficult to show patience.
That's hard.
Let Lindsay take that first. I always have opinions, so I'll let Lindsay go.
We're all staying quiet for the other one. Yes, this is hard. Totally feel for you here. As an informal leader, I can only imagine as a formalized leader, the experience here. But I thankfully in our organization, we have lots of open and transparent feedback loops. So my first go-to for me, if I was in the situation, was to provide that feedback, and either to that person, to the group individually, different ways to just, they might not even notice that this is happening. So first raise awareness for it and just I use the non-aggressive feedback form normally. So what the action was, how it made me feel, and an action to change it next time. And so that way I've normally found a lot of success. Also finding allies in that group. Maybe other people are noticing it too, but they're not doing much to stop it from happening. So there's other ways to make this work, but it is definitely a hard spot, and you can do it. Any other thoughts before we go to the next one?
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. How can we use the Ted Lasso way while dealing with imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. And I think really by following the points that we called out here, and sticking through it, like remaining authentic. If I don't know if you've seen this show or not, but Ted appeared like almost a bit of an idiot when he got there in people's eyes. They really were laughing at him. They didn't think this guy, he was a joke. They didn't think anything of him, but he remained authentic. And, when he didn't know something, he owned it. He put his hand up and he asked the question. He brought in people, as Lindsay alluded to, allies. He brought these people in and he promoted them. And he just stayed true to who he was and didn't waver on that. And I think it's really important never to waver and just to stay true to who you are.
Thank you, Dee. We do have another question. Any suggestions on creating team spirit?
Oh man, I think now remote life, it can be different. Actually, Lindsay and I worked on a team, several months ago, and we actually worked in like weekly team breaks. where we would play like Scribblio or code names. And I remember we had like a couple like kind of reluctant, skeptical people, but they came once and played and they're like, when are we doing this again? So I don't know, trying to break up that rhythm of like all discussions are only about work, and kind of have something else to do that's fun as a team. That was one thing, but I'm totally down to hear from Dee and Lindsay too. I'm sure y'all have awesome ideas.
Yeah, +1. I've seen some teams do icebreakers at stand up to keep it light, especially at the beginning of a project, just to get that morale going. And also just having, everything else that goes along with the culture. So the feedback loops, the respect for the team, everything with that normally increases morale too.
+1, everything the girls just said here.
All right, and I do think we have a few more minutes for these last questions. What's the best way to provide feedback in a remote organization? What are your favorite communications tools?
I love this question, and it's a question we often ask candidates in an interview process, because feedback is extremely important. It helps us grow, it keeps us aware, and without it, we're kind of going blind, right? We're traveling in the dark, so to speak. And I personally, and I think a lot of people, prefer direct feedback and quick responsive feedback. It's not healthy to leave things fester and bubble up inside you, because they tend to manifest themselves in a manner then that may not be the best at getting across your point. So for me, I think if there's feedback, share it continuously and promptly in a one-to-one. Ideally it would be a one-to-one in-person meeting, but obviously over the past few years we haven't had that luxury. So obviously a one-to-one Zoom meeting with cameras on, and and always understand, I think in a world today as well, we've a whole different challenge that people have personally with their home lives and everything that's going on. And when you're giving feedback, just try to remain empathetic, as we called out during the slides, at all times. Just be kind, because no one knows what's going on in someone else's time. So it's really important as a leader to always remain kind when you're delivering that feedback.
Great, thank you so much. I do believe that that's all the time that we have for questions. Thank you for everyone who used the Q&A area to provide questions to our panelists, and sorry to those questions that we weren't able to get to, but I do see that they're being answered in the chat while we wrap up here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming and all the comments and everything. It makes it a lot easier as a speaker, so thank you.
And go try Ted Lasso if you haven't.
Yes, it's super funny. This has been fun. Thank you all.